from the land of night plow routes, snow shoveling soreness, and fatal bear attacks, this is Minnesota Unknown.
Each week, we'll take a deep dive into Minnesota's storied past, with a special emphasis on the surprising, the unusual, and little-known history hidden in plain sight. My name is Alex Weston.
I'm Josie Bergman.
I'm Hannah Norton.
And we are Minnesota Unknown.
Boy, do I have a bear of a story for you guys today.
Okay.
You may have seen on the news, guys. I don't know if you know what's going on in Japan, but...
I don't.
Really? Okay. They have brown bears over there, and those bears have been lighting things up. They've been like left, right, and center attacking people, like to the point that kids can't go to school and there are guards outside of schools.
Like more than normal?
Yeah. So this isn't from an article written on November 14th, so not that long ago. Since April of 2025, at least 13 people have been killed and more than 100 have been injured in bear attacks in Japan. And that is the highest since Japan began keeping records of bear attacks, which was 2006. So basically, Japan is having this huge surge of bear attacks to the point where the military has had to get involved. So it's got me thinking a lot about bears, and that's saying something for me because bears are my favorite animal by far.
Okay, so bears are out of control in Japan.
Bears are out of control in Japan.
We are not Japan unknown. We are Minnesota unknown.
Correct.
And we
Tell
are
me,
safe.
how many bear fatalities occur in Minnesota?
Well, let me just rewind a little bit and talk to you about this. Minnesota does not have brown bears, thankfully. We have black bears.
Which are often brown.
They can be brown, yes.
Cinnamon.
Yep. Cinnamon bears. But it did lead me to be interested in kind of looking up some information on fatal bear attacks because I had to assume there have been some kind of violent, probably a couple of fatal encounters with black bears. But Alex, why don't you go ahead and just look up fatal black bear attacks in Minnesota?
All right.
Wow. The Foley work is astonishing.
So on the official website of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, it states that there have been no fatal bear attacks in Minnesota. The closest bear attack fatality occurred across the border in Ontario in 2019.
What if I told you that that was incorrect?
You're telling me there's a bear attack they don't want me to know about.
I'm saying that they are trying to hide this from you. It's a massive cover-up.
I want to know about this fatal bear attack.
Yes, and I'll get to why I think that this is not listed in the article.
So there's perhaps a reason why it's not on the DNR's website.
There is.
Got
but
it.
Am I going to claim it as a conspiracy theory until the day I die? Absolutely.
We wouldn't be a proper podcast without a conspiracy theory to promote.
So this is my non-conspiracy theory conspiracy theory.
We should be spreading more false information.
Right. Okay, so I want you to put in the Arthur sound effect here. It is Sunday, November 11th, 1934, and a captive black bear in Mankato, Minnesota at the Sibley Park Zoo is just going about his usual routine. It shares its cage with another black bear. It's a female. And typically this bear is cared for by the zoo superintendent. The zoo superintendent is Clarence Staley. He's 54 years old, come from work as a railroad engineer and then a worker at the Sibley Park Zoo in Mankato, and worked his way up to becoming its superintendent in about 1914. By 1936, we have records that he was married with 3 sons and 1 granddaughter, and he'd been in charge of the zoo for about 22 years. He had also achieved notoriety during this time because newspapers were reporting on this lion and dog pair that he raised together and named Mutt and Jeff. So it was kind of one of those like Ripley's Believe It or Not, like, look at this lion and this dog lying down together.
Best buds.
Best buds. They actually, they were housed in a cage together.
So sorry, you said it and then my brain washed over it. Tell me again, what zoo is this? Tell me a little bit about this zoo.
So this is the Sibley Park Zoo in Mankato, Minnesota. It is in this really big kind of open parkland area on the river. There's kind of like shooting grounds there. Clarence Staley had worked for a long time to develop gardens there and picnic areas and things like that.
Is it still there?
Yes. Yeah. You can still go there. The zoo is still technically there. It's more of a petting zoo now, which actually, as we go on, we're going to find out it was kind of a petting zoo back then. So Clarence Staley is in charge of this big career shift, going from a railroad engineer to being just a worker at the zoo and then working his way up to being in charge of it. And he just really seemed like he had a lot of personal investment in the zoo. So zoos at this time were a bit different than they are today. I was doing kind of a lot of research in just local Minnesota zoos, and they were really big right around the early 1900s and on into right about the time we're talking about. They'd even started a little bit before that in the late 1800s, and they were really kind of part of the first early years of the conservation efforts. So the idea back then, which we've come a little ways from now, but the idea back then was basically people are coming into the United States. We are hunting big game. We're clearing animals out of areas that we need for us to use, and we need them to be safe. So the best way to preserve these animals and to still have them around is to put them in zoos. And obviously that's not how we go about things anymore. We do a lot of wildlife management, and there's efforts to build populations in the wild and things like that, because we've realized that they're a pretty big part of keeping the whole ecosystem running. But back then, this was seen as the frontier of conservation, is keeping animals in zoos. Now, we've also come a long way from how they kind of used to approach having these animals in captivity. These animals are kind of seen, and especially bears, because that's what I was focusing on, they're really seen as kind of these cute, cuddly, harmless sort of creatures. They're just funny, silly, like friendly little souls, and you really shouldn't worry about them. There was this article that I was looking at. I might have Alex, you can go in and read.
To quote the Minneapolis Journal on May 20th, 1934, "No animal has been more talked about and more written about than the bear. In legends, folklore, fairy tales, fables, and the like, the bear appears time and time again. Sometimes he's a hero, at other times a villain, but hero or villain, he's always an ungainly clown. Even when he is serious, the bear always gives the impression of being a clumsy and simple oaf, deserving of human tolerance and pity. The bear's habit of walking erect at times, with a rolling gait like a sailor's, his curious playfulness at other times, his meddlesomeness, and his strange failing for continually getting himself into trouble have made him the buffoon of the animal kingdom. But the bear has swinish eyes, and no beast with swinish eyes should be trusted."
That's by far my favorite quote that I found in newspapers.com.
That took a turn.
What? I know. The bear has swinish eyes.
"The innocent pose of the bear has thrown many a hapless hunter completely off his guard and brought dismay or tragedy to many a hunting expedition." Okay, so
we got a lot of mixed feelings on bears.
There's a lot to unpack here.
Someone had a really deep emotional experience with a bear betraying them, and it's becoming very clear in this article.
Yeah,
like, what did
tough.
that bear do to you? So that one kind of talks a little bit about how they can be dangerous. But then there's a lot of other references to them that are very storybook, almost like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, that kind of thing, talking about like little folk tales about bears, or they often call them like Bruin or Mrs. Bruin. That's just like a really, really old name for bears. It means brown. So people just started using it to refer to bears.
Even though these are black bears.
Even though these are black bears.
Yeah. There's kind of this sort of affection that the writers kind of show towards bears. Like, they're kind of bumbling, they can be dangerous, but overall they're just these cute, folksy characters.
Yeah, let's have Josie read The Happy Hooligan of the Woods.
Yes. Can you read it from there, Josie?
An amiable brute. The black bear is the happy hooligan of the woods. He is not a bit ferocious. This much maligned animal is just a lazy, playful loafer that avoids men and fights or works only when he is compelled to do so.
Which can describe me. So, am I a black bear?
The black bear has more human-like traits than any other animal I know. He is a boy in disguise who will not work long at anything unless it's something to produce mischief. Occasionally, he finds things dull and simply does not know what to do with himself. He is happy-go-lucky, and taking thought of the morrow is not one of his troubles. He is afraid of the grizzly and avoids man as though he were a pestilence. And that describes me. He plans no harm. In other words, the black bear is just the opposite in character of what he had long been thought, and still almost universally believed to be. A million writers and spoken stories have it that he is ferocious, a wanton, cruel killer. He fights or works only when compelled to do so. He is the most plausible bluffer I have ever seen. He appears terrible. He pulls himself out of many a predicament and obtains many an unearned morsel in this way. Most of his bluffs are for amusement. He will go far out of his way for the purpose of running.
Not a way to describe me.
A black bear climbs a tree almost as readily as a cat, and he climbs a small pole or large tree with equal ease. The grizzly does not climb trees, but the black bear, with its cat-like forepaws, can simply race up a tree trunk. Much of his time, both asleep and awake, is spent in treetops. He might almost be called a perching animal. The black bear eats everything that is edible.
That is true. That's a good point to make. They eat everything. They're omnivores. So,
young black bears have good tempers and are playful in captivity, but if teased or annoyed, they become troublesome and even dangerous with age. If thine enemy offend thee, present him with a black bear cub that has been mistreated. He is an intense, high-strung animal, and if subjected to annoyances, teasing, or occasional cruelty, becomes revengeful and vindictive. Sometimes he will even look for trouble, and once in a fight has the tenacity of a bulldog.
okay, so they also say in here, the black bear has never been protected as a game animal. Through all the seasons of the year, with gun and dogs, the hunter is allowed to pursue him. It would be well for a few years to have a closed season on bears. As he is verging on extinction, and as he gives the wilds much of their spirit, there ought to be a closed season to protect this rollicking fellow of the forest. So you can see there that they have been brought down in number from where they were sort of as settlers started to come into those areas and adopt practices of shooting them versus, kind of keeping them around and deterring them. And that is a trend that would continue through a lot of the 1900s. They are rising in number now, which we'll get back to. But by the time we get back to Clarence Staley and the Mankato Zoo, black bears were considered something that you did want to have in a zoo because they sort of showed you the spirit of the wilderness and the woods and Minnesota as it used to be. And so they were kind of this cool animal. They're viewed as mostly harmless unless they're mistreated as cubs. There was also another conservationist that said that the black bear is a harmless, simple-minded animal possessing a pig-like intelligence.
Along with the swinish eyes.
Exactly. And then the fact that male bears are called boars and females are sows. Like, are we confused?
That's just confusing.
Yeah, they're deliberately trying to confuse us. It's more of the cover-up.
We didn't have our own words for female Papa bear and Mama bear.
Come on.
Come on, guys.
So generally, people think bears are fun-loving,
Yes.
but there is an undercurrent of, we also know under certain conditions, they're dangerous.
Exactly. And Clarence Staley was used to interacting with them. And the interesting thing, too, is that though Sibley Park had bear cages for a while, and they were kind of, if you can imagine, so we found an old postcard that shows what the cages looked like at Sibley Park Zoo. It's basically like a long building with what I assume is kind of closed-in animal shelters inside of it, and then doors from those to kind of outer fenced-in areas.
And they're pretty small by today's standards.
They're pretty small, yeah. And these are very typical of any other pictures of zoos that I saw, whether it's up in Fairmont, whether it's the Minnehaha Park bear dens. They have strong iron bars, and then they allow people to get pretty close.
Yeah, if you're trying to picture what these things look like and you've ever been to Como Zoo, they have like that section kind of up by the entrance that's all like the old zoo cages.
By the bronze turtle statue.
Yeah, they're like, the outdoor area is probably like at most 20 by 20 feet with like another probably like 20 by 10 indoor enclosure thing. Like
and
these
you
are
can
very
walk
small.
right up to it.
And what that means is that you can easily approach the bears, and you can, if you want to, feed them. And you might want to feed them because you're being actively encouraged to feed them, because at least at the Minnehaha Park Zoo at the same time, there were literal stands around the area that sold cakes to feed to the bears.
Cakes?
Yeah, little cakes, because they love sweet treats.
They love cakes.
They love sweet treats. Can you scroll down past the postcard?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a 1904 article in the Minneapolis Daily Times. And so this is prior to the era that we're talking about at Sibley Park Zoo. But given the other articles that I've seen, I think it's fair to say this is the type of thing that was going on.
Okay, and we will post an image of this in our show notes, which is at minnesotaunknown.com/podcast. We'll post a link to this. But this is an article about the zoos at Minnehaha Falls, the Longfellow Gardens.
I will say, I think it's worth reading the whole article because there's just a lot of really funny little quips in it.
Under the subheadline, it says, "These bears like sweets. They beg for cake most pitifully and will eat fruit, pie, sweets of any kind. But the lumbering brutes have become so far pampered, as far as appetite is concerned, that they will scorn plain bread and butter with a sniff that is almost human." One day last week, quite a crowd was gathered about the pit watching the huge animals beg for sweets, when one of the big bears suddenly floundered into the water tank and took a bath. As soon as the news could reach the hundreds of little ones who were near that part of the grounds, the place was filled with eager little faces pressed up to the bars of the pit, wonderingly witnessing a live animal taking a voluntary bath.
Alex, you have kids. How would you feel if you saw their wondering little faces pressed up against the bars of a bear cage?
If it's taking a cute bath, who could resist?
That's what I'm saying.
It definitely seems like maybe not as close as you want to get.
Probably not.
Yeah. Bruin sloshed about in the cool water for several minutes and then climbed out into the sunshine. One young woman stood near the lower end of the pit, and as the bear came out of the tank, she held a bit of cake toward him and said in a coaxing tone of voice, "See here, Bruin, here's some cake." Everybody watched the scene intently, and the bear floundered across the pit toward the proffered cake. The young woman, however, was nervous. Just at the critical moment, when the Bruin reached up his nose to get the cake, she dropped it. And it fell where neither of them could get it.
Oh, how silly of her to be nervous that a bear was going to eat from her actual fingers.
The bear was disgusted and turned his side toward the young woman. Then he leered about and shook himself like a dog. His coat was heavy and it carried much water, and with it out of the tank, and the deluge that followed his effort to get rid of the superfluous water struck the young woman like a shower bath. There was a scream and a confusion in the crowd.
And I will say, a lot of the zoo articles are like this.
Yeah.
They're written just in the most over the top, like hijinks ensue kind of way. So I'd recommend doing a quick zoo search on newspapers.com. But you can see from that that was common. I think that's really telling of kind of the attitude towards especially bears at this point.
Not a lot of caution.
But there should have been, because even in this a little more laissez-faire kind of attitude, they were having some incidents. So in 1923, the Mankato Sibley Park Zoo was sued to the tune of $1,032 by the father of a boy from Waseca named Clifford Johnson, who his father alleged had his finger bitten off by one of the bears at Sibley Park Zoo. That's, I feel like, maybe an incident that you would take some caution from. Black bears do tend to be very shy, but something that was true of them back then and is still true of them now is if they are habituated to humans, meaning that they're around them enough that they lose their natural instinct to fear humans.
Like, say, we're feeding them cakes every day.
Well, that's the other part. So that's food conditioning. So if they're seeing humans every day, that's already habituating them and getting them used to humans. But then they can also be food conditioned, which means that they begin to associate humans with food. Not as a food source, as in they're going to eat us necessarily, but
food comes from our hands.
Exactly.
We hand it to them.
When I see this person, A, I'm not afraid of them, and B, they usually mean that I'm going to get something that I'm going to eat. And so instinctually, instead of all the instincts that should be pushing them away from us for their safety and ours, those are kind of reversed. So I'll bring us back to Sunday, November 11th, 1934. Sibley Park Zoo can proudly say it's been 11 years since their last bear incident. So a woman is walking by one of the cages. She's a visitor. And like little Clifford Johnson, who had his finger bitten off, she got drawn in by those adorable big chonky bears. And she got a little too close. Now, fortunately, the only thing she lost was her purse. I don't know what she was doing with it. Was she dangling it over? Was she putting it in for some reason? Not sure. But she's dropped her purse into one of the cages. Someone nearby tries to scoop it out with a rake, which must have been quite a sight already, but that failed. And so Clarence Staley, who's busy showing a visiting family with their 3 kids, kind of a close-up view of that lion and dog duo that's so famous. He's like, come over in here and see Mutt and Jeff. So he takes them into kind of the back area of the enclosure, where I assume there's doors to all of the cages. And he's like, okay, so you guys can look at the lion and the dog. And then he says, by the way, I have to stop by at the bear cage to get this purse back for this lady. So the woman who dropped the purse in, she begs him not to go in, apparently, which was a good instinct, but he laughed it off. He was really comfortable with the bears. He'd raised this particular one from a cub, according to one of the articles. He had the kind of familiarity with it that made him feel really confident that it was a situation that he could be in control of. He threw some feed into the cage to distract the bears. The smaller of the bears, so the female, starts to eat, and Staley steps in and closes the door behind him. And as he steps in, Josie, what did he say?
I don't know how these fellas will act. I haven't been taking care of them lately.
So I don't know if there's a more ironic statement he could have made. What he meant is it had been the whole summer, basically, since he'd been in that cage. He used to do all the feeding for them, but over the summer, an assistant had been taking care of them. I'm not sure to what level that played a role, but we're going to see what happened. So as he steps in, he makes that remark, and immediately the larger male bear charges him and bites his leg, bringing him to the ground. Mr. Ferguson, who's the dad of the visiting family, grabbed the rake, which was still nearby, and starts beating the bear as hard as he can through the bars of the cage. This obviously didn't work. So black bears, when you look at them, you might think, okay, they're not as big as you think. Like I was imagining a grizzly bear. This one isn't so big, but they are made of like pure muscle. They're very, very strong. And when they're in that kind of mode, they're very tenacious.
And so he's just not letting go. The bear is just chomped on.
Yep, he's chomped on, and he's basically, I think, yanked on Mr. Staley's leg and brought him to the ground. So he's getting beaten by this rake. He's got Staley on the ground. It's not working to get him off. But Mr. Ferguson beat the bear so hard with the rake that he broke the handle off and then yelled for someone to get a gun and start sprinting towards the main house on the property for a phone to call for help. So as soon as he's gone, Mr. Shepard, who's a man who's visiting Mankato with his family as well, he arrives on the scene and he takes action. So, Alex, you want to read this one?
He says, I shouted for someone to get a gun and ran to a tree which had been cut down and used it as a club. I understand Mr. Ferguson already had broken the rake on the bear. With the club, I succeeded in knocking the bear loose once, but he immediately jumped back onto the keeper and dragged him toward the den.
So we go back to Mr. Ferguson, who's arrived at the only house on the property. I believe it's the caretaker house. So Mr. Staley, I'm assuming, lived there. He's arrived to find the house is locked. But fortunately, Mr. Shepard's daughter, Donna, who is 18, a teacher's college student, she just takes action and bashes in the window. And then Mr. Ferguson crawls in and starts dialing for the police.
I mean, so the first thing you learn when you're in a teacher's ed program is just smash windows.
Yeah, exactly. So while all of this has been going on, a young boy named Dick Evans was target shooting with his .22 along the river. Because remember, this is a big park. There's a lot of open land.
And it's the 30s, so kids are just running around with guns.
Yeah. And he apparently was pretty well practiced. So at this time, he was target shooting. And he's a strong South Mankato lad. So he runs towards the screams. Maybe that's just a preteen boy thing to hear screams and shouts and just be like, oh, that sounds interesting.
You have a rifle and you're definitely like,
he's got
I'm
a
the
gun.
hero.
Yes, da-da-da. So he finds that the bear has dragged Mr. Staley halfway into its den by this point. He takes his .22, he fires 4 or 5 shots at the male bear and manages to bring it down, which, by the way, is in the semi-darkness. So the big male bear, he is inside the den, dragging Staley into the den, and this boy manages with a .22 to shoot him and bring him down, like from outside. I know.
That's impressive.
It was pretty impressive.
Pretty impressive with a .22.
I would think a 22 would just piss the bear off.
It usually would, which is why it's even more impressive. So he must have not only like managed to hit it, but hit it like in a good spot. Yeah, it is quite impressive, honestly. And at that point, I mean, typically they look for non-lethal solutions with problem bears in this day and age. But even today, I think if there's one that has done something like this.
If the bear has a man in his mouth,
exactly,
you shoot the bear.
There's nothing to really be done except to do that. So the police arrive after that point. And since they were not apparently told the full situation on the phone or just did not comprehend it, they only brought their sidearms and some sawed-off shotguns.
Well, I mean, for police at that time, that's about all they would have. Like, police were not super armed at this point.
I mean, they're the city cops, so it's not like they're like, we're ready to go hunt a bear.
Right.
Because this is the same era that cops are basically getting wasted by gangsters because the gangsters have all these surplus World War I weapons, and the cops just have these tiny little revolvers.
Ma Barker?
What?
Like Ma Barker, but Ma Barker?
I did not track that at all. But regardless, the newspapers did kind of make a point of these cops did not understand what they were walking into at all. This was a problem because even though the male bear who was originally attacking Staley is down, the female bear, they reported, is now guarding the entrance to the den and was blocking access to Staley. Don't worry, though, because good old Dick Evans is here, and he takes her down with one shot from his .22.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So shout out to him.
I mean, that's very sad for the bear, but again, this is an extreme situation.
It was an extreme situation, and it's one of those situations where you're like, okay, I guess this is how it's going to be solved. So, unfortunately, despite the heroic actions of everyone involved, but mainly the 18-year-old college student, Donna, and good old Dick Evans with his 22.
And gun-toting teen.
Yeah, and teaching college assistant and gun-toting teen save the day. When they're finally able to retrieve Staley from the bear cage, he was found to be already dead. At some point after biting his leg, the male bear grabbed him by the neck, which basically like severed his spinal column and killed him instantly. It's not a terribly uncommon move for black bears. So black bears are typically unlikely to attack. Most attacks happen from grizzly bears. So statistically, you're very unlikely to get attacked by a black bear. But if you do, it's typically because there's something that's either a little wrong with it in the head.
And possibly the eyes.
Possibly the swinish eyes. Or it's just a really, really bad set of situations. Like a grizzly bear, oftentimes they're charging you for one of a few reasons. Either you've invaded their territory, you're too close to something that they've killed and want to eat, you're too close to their babies, or you've just really, really startled them in a really unlucky way. A lot of times, basically, if you can make yourself seem like not a threat, so play dead, they will retreat because they don't really want a conflict. With a black bear, a lot of times, if they do get to the point of attacking you, it does seem that it can be food motivated or predatory, and they'll oftentimes go with all types of bears for the head or the face or the neck. And so it does make sense that the black bear would go after him like this. Reports did say that his body was not mauled by the bears. So aside from the bite on his leg, it was a fairly quick death, especially as far as bear attacks are concerned, because especially grizzly bears are really well known for not bothering to kill you before they eat you. Sometimes they can take their time a little bit. And so I will say I'm glad that it sounds like he was spared a longer ordeal. The papers in general reported the attack as being caused by the bears not recognizing Mr. Staley since he hadn't been their main caretaker in a while, like he had mentioned literally as he closed the door behind him. And also the bears being aggravated by the rake being used to try to get the purse out of the enclosure and then later to beat them.
Before he even gets in there, the rake is entering their space and maybe putting them on guard.
Right, exactly. And then he throws food in there and the female starts to eat. You know, I'm not sure. I'm not a bear expert. I have reached out to bear experts, and if I hear back from them, I will update you. But there are a lot of things at play. I mean, the bears are very habituated to humans. They're very used to seeing humans all the time, so their natural fear is gone. They're used to being fed by humans, so they're gonna associate people with food in a variety of ways. They've already been irritated because one would assume that something was being done with this purse way too close to the bear cage, and then a rake was being poked into their den, which can't have made them more calm. And then you throw food into the mix, so one of them's already eating. Staley comes in. I don't know to what extent bears get familiarized with their keepers, but if he was an especially unrecognized smell, maybe that contributed to it too.
Everything about this interaction is not the standard thing. You know, someone's feeding him every day. That's not what's happening here.
Yeah. I can't really speak to all the intricacies of why it happened, but I think it's safe to say that there were a lot of things that we've listed that made this situation very unpredictable and dangerous.
So to bring us full circle, I can see why I think the DNR doesn't count this because it's not a wild bear attack.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
in captivity.
Yes. And I 100% see why. But will I always claim it as a conspiracy theory? Yes. And I just find that unbearable. I will also say as a little tag on here, today's Minnesota state black bear population hovers between 12,000 and 16,000 black bears and is slowly on the rise since 2012. There are a series of food failure years that do tend to drive some bears to come to northwestern Minnesota. So sometimes they move a little bit down the state. They will take food from farmlands and crops, and there are a lot more sightings of females with cubs. So there is a growing population of black bears in especially in like the St. Croix area, and in Wisconsin, they're really moving down. So I would expect if you're out there and you're a bear fan, keep your eyes open because we'll probably see more bear incidents out there.
So keep cakes with you at all times.
Oh my gosh, yeah for sure. And watch out for those swinish eyes. I guess the moral of the story is don't go into any encounter with a wild animal, no matter how little of a threat you might think it is, thinking that you're the one in control.
And that's it for this episode. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into Minnesota's storied past. You can find detailed show notes for this and all episodes at minnesotaunknown.com/podcast. We'll post a link there to each episode along with features such as accompanying images, links to more info, and lists of sources cited. If you have questions, comments, corrections, complaints, or compliments, please email us at info@minnesotaunknown.com. We'd truly love to hear from you. Unless it's mean, and then I'll cry. You can find Minnesota Unknown wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss an episode. And if you have a moment to rate and review, that would really help others find us. We also give history walking tours around the Twin Cities. To learn more about our current and upcoming tours, head to minnesotaunknown.com. Minnesota Unknown is produced, hosted, written, and researched by Hannah Norton, Josie Bergman, and Alex Weston. Our theme song is by Union Shakedown. This episode is copyright 2026 by Minnesota Unknown, LLC. All rights reserved.
I'm saying that they are trying to hide this from you. It's a massive cover-up.
Is they the Bears?
They are the Bears, yeah. They've actually infiltrated the DNR.
I did see a DNR booth at Pride that was full of bears.
Oh, well, a group of bears is not called a pride. That's lions, but close.